Good afternoon. Welcome to this session that is geographic names, entitled Geographic Names. We will have two speakers on one side, well, three actually. At the last minute, we made a change. On one side, we have Lázlo Zentai. He was born in the country of Hungary, and we will have the intervention of two colleagues from IFE, that is the Mexican Voting Institute for Mexico. The way we're going to work is exactly the same way we have been working all day long. First, we will be hearing each one of the speakers for 20 minutes, each one. And then we will have a Q&A session that will last 20 minutes as well. So I'm going to allow myself to introduce Professor Zentai.
So he was born in Hungary in 1959. He is currently head of the Cartography and Geoinformatics Department and Vice Dean of International Relations and Research at Eötvös University in Budapest, and he is Secretary General of the International Cartographic Association. He has a master's in cartography and a PhD in cartography from the Eötvös University in Budapest. And in 2005, he had another PhD in sciences from the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. He has also, from 1998 to 1992, he was a lecturer at the university. From 1992 to 1996, assistant professor, associate professor from 1996 to 2006, head of the department from 2005 to date, and full professor from 2006 to date. He is chairman of the ICA Commission on Education and Training. He was from 2003 to 2007, and since 2011 he has been Secretary General of ICA. His recent publications we can mention the role, he's reading the title of one of your papers, The Legibility of Maps in the Cartography Journal in May 2011, New Opportunities for Thematic Mapping, also the use of new technologies in mapping, making orienteering maps, in the Scientific Journal of Orienteering. He was co-author of Spatial Tracking in Sport, and this was in location-based services and telecartography. And he participated in the 4th International Symposium on the History of Cartography in Budapest, the 25th International Cartographic Conference in Paris in July 2011, the Central and Eastern European Cartographic Conference in Vienna, the Early Warning and Disaster Management Seminar in Prague in 2009, and the Intercarto Inter-GIS 12 Conference in Berlin in August 2006. Okay, so we give the floor to the doctor. Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes, damas y caballeros. Desafortunadamente, como verán en mi primera transparencia, esto no tiene nada que mi presentación no tendrá nada que ver con nombres geográficos, pero pues ni modo, no estén muy decepcionados. Así que el título de mi presentación es mapas temáticos en nueva cartografía es como una evaluación de mapas temáticos y yo quisiera investigar los desarrollos y los hitos tecnológicos en cuanto a la tecnología de la información y cómo esto afectó la evolución de mapas temáticos. O sea, este es un libro que se llama Brave New World, que quiere decir nuevo y valoroso libro, que es un libro muy famoso, una novela muy famosa de Aldous Huxley. Y hoy en día esto tiene un significado bastante peculiar que ha cambiado desde que se publicó. Entonces, si esto tendrá algo que ver con el significado que le dio a Huxley, si esto tiene que ver con la cartografía moderna. Y que si tuviésemos la oportunidad de participar en la sesión anterior, muchos de los ponentes hablaron acerca de que tenemos tanta información disponible hoy en día que para poderla utilizar eficientemente es muy difícil para todos nosotros y sobre todo para los cartógrafos. Entonces, los cambios que son la esencia de la ciencia y los cambios en la cartografía que han ocurrido en los últimos 50 años han sido verdaderamente dramáticos. También hubo cambios importantes, no solo en cartografía en su conjunto, sino en las técnicas de producción en la segunda mitad del siglo XXI. Gran parte del mundo no se conocía muy bien y no se había mapeado hasta la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Pero la cartografía anterior se basaba en la observación en el terreno y los sensores remotos. Pero el cambio más importante en ese momento fue la implementación de tecnologías digitales en la cartografía. Entonces, la información tecnológica puede proporcionar soluciones cartográficas que tienen que ver con la recolección de datos y el manejo de datos, de grandes volúmenes de datos. Hoy en día, claro que la observación a nivel del terreno es importante. Si vemos los primeritos mapas temáticos que fueron creados por computadoras, principalmente a finales de la década de los 60 y a principios de los 70, pues nos damos cuenta que sí había computadoras en ese tiempo, pero necesitaban, bueno, no hablando de los más recientes, pero aunque no eran súper potentes, sí podían hacer cálculos mucho más rápidos que un humano. El problema principal es cómo podemos visualizar los resultados, y en esa época los dispositivos de resultados eran muy pobres. Así que los mejores resultados se veían así. Así que estos fueron los primerísimos mapas temáticos digitales. Y desde entonces, más o menos hace 40 años, bueno, hemos evolucionado muchísimo, muchísimo en cuanto a mapas temáticos. Uno de los hitos más importantes es el GIS o el SIG. Jack Daterman, que es uno de los ponentes magistrales, fundó su compañía en 1969. Así que desde entonces, o incluso un poco antes de eso, podemos hablar acerca de sistemas geográficos como tecnología compleja. Por supuesto, el GIS se enfoca principalmente en el análisis de datos y para toma de decisiones, etcétera. Pero como dijeron en la sesión anterior, el presidente como dijo el presidente de la Asociación Cartográfica, no hay visualización sin mapas y no se toman decisiones sin mapas. Así que los mapas son son cruciales para entender las relaciones espaciales por los usuarios. La mayoría de los mapas que se creaban automáticamente, estos mapas no implementan estrictamente las reglas cartográficas, sobre todo en los entornos donde la resolución y la pantalla es bastante limitada. Por supuesto que hoy en día la mayoría de los mapas GIS se generan automáticamente con herramientas, y a veces la interpretación de estos mapas puede ser difícil para usuarios que no son muy experimentados. No es un gran problema porque el propósito de estos mapas es normalmente para dar apoyo en la toma de decisiones. Aquí les puedo mostrar uno de los primeros mapas en mi país, en Hungría, que se produjo por software GIS, y entonces se imprimió el resultado. Entonces necesitamos por lo menos 15, 20 años para manejar el resultado profesional en un entorno completamente GIS, porque no podemos decir que el mapa no está muy bonito porque está hecho por una computadora. Así que tuvimos que dedicarle mucho tiempo para que el mapa final fuese tan cartográficamente correcto como si se hubiesen utilizado un proceso tradicional para levantar un mapa. Esto me los voy a saltar. Okay. Bueno, como dije anteriormente, GIS tenía visualización pobre en un principio. Yo me acuerdo que en una de las conferencias un tutor mencionó que por lo menos 95% de los mapas creados estaba utilizando la leyenda predeterminada porque los usuarios no tenían la menor idea que podían o no sabían cómo hacerle, cómo cambiar el nombre. Bueno, por suerte eso ya ha cambiado, pero fue hace como 10 o 15 años. Así que aquí tenemos algunos mapas temáticos con base en GIS tempranos que utilizaban las leyendas predeterminadas para su visualización. El segundo desarrollo importante fue los sistemas GPS o GNSS. Y esto no está vinculado estrictamente con mapas temáticos, pero lo menciono principalmente porque ayudó a los usuarios a enlazar ese dato con ubicaciones geográficas, lo hizo mucho más fácil que antes. Así que GPS ha cambiado la navegación en todas las zonas donde no se necesita súper alta precisión. Y en muchas áreas o zonas, en efecto, no hace falta que la precisión sea súper definida. Claro que hay un número cada vez mayor de usuarios de GPS que quieren mapas muy precisos, entonces quieren mapas digitales. Y lo que es también importante es el remapeo sistemático, o sea, que la actualización se haga tan frecuentemente como sea posible. Hoy hemos oído de muchas declaraciones hablando de geoubicación, geolocalización y fotografías, y que todos los datos sí tienen que ser geolocalizados para poderlo usar más eficientemente. Así que la GPS ofreció una buena oportunidad para los usuarios que generaban muchos datos sobre el terreno, pero era muy complicado sin el dispositivo GPS. Así que aquí tenemos algunos ejemplos de mapas sobre todo mapas temáticos de gran escala, por ejemplo, en silvicultura o el mapeo de vegetación, donde los expertos en esa zona pueden simplemente utilizar, pueden usar algo que es muy fácil de usar y muy accesible, un dispositivo que es así, aprietan el botón y salen los coordinados. Antes era mucho más complicado. Luego lo que pasó, o el desarrollo más importante, fue el Internet, que también abrió muchas oportunidades para el mapeo temático, sobre todo como fuente de información que ayudaba a los usuarios a accesar la información y compartirla con otros. La primera vez, por supuesto, que es cuando empezó el Internet. Bueno, normalmente hablamos de Internet, pero no lo usamos correctamente porque el término en sí se mencionó por primera vez en los 80, pero en realidad estamos hablando de el World Wide Web, o sea, la telaraña mundial que se estableció en 1991. Uno de los hitos importantes que también se mencionó varias veces hoy es Google Earth y Google Maps, los mapas de Google, que se lanzó en 2005, o sea, hace menos de 10 años. Así que realmente es muy difícil predecir qué va a ocurrir dentro de 10 años, porque nadie podría imaginarse hace 10 años que tendríamos un servicio como Google Maps. Y hay otros servicios como Google Street Maps, Street View, o sea, la visualización a nivel de la calle, etcétera. Aquí tenemos algunos mapas temáticos que utilizan estos servicios geográficos. Yo creo que estos están basados en códigos abiertos. Sin embargo, el desarrollo de una aplicación para mapeo basada en Internet siguió siendo muy complejo en un principio. Y esto limitaba el número de desarrolladores y hacía que el mapeo costara mucho dinero, que su costo fuese muy elevado. La mayoría de los organismos cartográficos nacionales empezaron a compartir los datos con los usuarios y entonces establecieron sus propios servicios cartográficos porque pensaban que tenían un entorno seguro para poner a disposición sus datos. El Internet también está redefiniendo cómo se utilizan los mapas. Los mapas en el Internet tienen más funcionalidad interactiva y pueden ser diseñados al interactuar con una base de datos en línea. Aquí tenemos algunos ejemplos de los primeros mapas GIS basados en Internet, o más bien mapas en Internet basados en GIS. También se dijo hoy que la Unión Europea, su directriz que se llama Inspire Directive, que entró en vigor en 2007, pero no se implementará en su totalidad hasta finales de esta década. Y lo último, o el último desarrollo importante es lo que se llama el Web 2.0. Hoy hemos oído términos como GIS o sea, GIS espacial o algo por el estilo. Pero da igual cómo le digamos, ni siquiera lo podemos decir cartografía 2.0 o neocartografía, pero es la democratización del proceso de comunicación cartográfico. Y esto ha llevado a un interés renovado en la disciplina de la cartografía, como dijo el señor Gardner en la sesión anterior, sobre todo en la cartografía temática. La tecnología de producción de mapas ahora está disponible Y los mapas en sí mismos son mucho más variados en cuanto a su apariencia y autoridad. Si comparamos lo que podríamos decir web 1.0 y 2.0 cartografía, podemos crear este cuadro comparativo para ver las diferencias entre ambos, la tecnología anterior y la más reciente. Ya que los mapas temáticos, o más bien, o los mejores, digamos, aparecen en los atlases nacionales y en la época digital, también tenemos atlases nacionales que fueron convertidos desde su forma tradicional en papel a digital, o primero en DVD y CD, y después de eso muy pronto fueron convertidos a formato o versiones en línea. Creo que el primer país fue Canadá, que migró su atlas nacional a una versión en línea. Y la mayoría de las versiones en línea, por lo menos en un inicio, utilizaban software que fue desarrollada para la representación de los atlas. Aquí tenemos un ejemplo del Atlas Nacional de Países Bajos. Y yo creo que este entorno lo conocemos todos. ¿Cómo podemos combinar datos? ¿Cómo podemos prender y apagar capas? Entonces, los cartógrafos en esta nueva época, ¿qué de ellos? La cartografía y GIS no pueden desarrollarse de forma independiente. Tienen que seguir tendencias comunes, sobre todo los cambios en las tecnologías de información. Ambos sectores, cartografía y GIS, utilizan el Internet más intensamente debido a la demanda de los usuarios, porque cambia la demanda de los usuarios y está cambiando rápidamente. También enseñarles mi teléfono móvil. Yo puedo que cualquiera de ustedes simplemente lo pueden bajar. O sea que es un nuevo dispositivo que tenemos que tomar en cuenta. Y no solo el Internet, sino esta comunicación móvil es un nuevo reto para nuestro entorno, nuestro sector. ¿Cómo ponemos un mapa en un teléfono celular o en un... Y eso es interesante no solo para la cartografía, sino para otros sectores. Entonces, como dije, Aldous Huxley, lo mencioné al principio. Entonces, este efecto de Big Brother, del hermano grande. Tenemos que solucionar este problema de privacidad. Yo vengo de un país, un país postcomunista, donde realmente sí éramos observados continuamente por un hermano grande, y la verdad no es lo que queríamos en el futuro, ¿no? Pero hoy en día la tecnología está disponible y el problema es que los usuarios no están conscientes de todos estos problemas o asuntos, o no les interesa para nada. Por supuesto, por un lado, la contribución de los usuarios, como por ejemplo el crowdsourcing, es decir, el suministro por parte de comunidades o ciudadanos. Así que, y por otro lado, es la privacidad. Así que hay que enseñarles o instruir a los usuarios. Entonces, los mapas hoy en día soportan los controladores y los proveedores de servicio, y ustedes habrán oído decir que las compañías donde hay mucho trabajo de redes comparten su información con terceros. O sea, si no leen el contrato de cabo a rabo. Entonces, fácilmente ustedes pueden decir, sí, estoy de acuerdo, y le están dando el permiso. Entonces, sí hay que, digamos que instruir a los usuarios. Entonces, estos mapas temáticos sí le puede dar al usuario un cierto de libertad porque pueden cambiar las categorías, los colores, etcétera, pero tenemos que ofrecer un entorno que sea amigable para el usuario y tan amigable como posible, pero deberíamos enseñarle al usuario cuáles son las alternativas que están disponibles o simplemente le ofrecemos los más importantes. Este es el reto para los cartógrafos. Muchísimas gracias por su atención.
We thank this very interesting talk by Professor Zentai. And now we will be discussing standards and considerations on geographic names by the IFE and the importance of identifying addresses. We have Miguel Ángel Rojano López. He is the head of National Cartography. Was not able to be among us today, but in his representation, we have Eduardo Cortés Gis and Mr. Valderas. So we are going to start with Ángel Vaz. He's assistant head in electoral campaigns.
Muchas gracias.
First of all, allow me to present to you an apology from Professor Miguel Ángel Rojano López, who should be among you today. Nevertheless,
Haciendo una mención muy rápida de la ponencia del doctor Zentai,
making a quick comment on Professor Zentai presentation, where he was saying that
de Aldous Huxley
on the Aldous Huxley
se
book,
basaba básicamente en el
it
control.
was based on the control and manipulation.
Bueno, no quiero ahondar
And
mucho al respecto, pero nosotros
I would not go
tenemos ya
into
a cargo la cartografía electoral.
deep details, but we have under our responsibility electoral cartography. So it is quite demanding, and at this moment in time, we are carrying out the preparation works to do the redistricting at a national level. So I wish to apologize Miguel Ángel Rojano López for not being able to be among us today. Well, the standards and considerations that we must observe in order to update those geographic names and the importance in identifying addresses. As you all know, by Constitution, it was approved a change in the political Mexican Constitution, whereas the National Geography and Statistics Institute has to establish the standards for geography and geographic names. And they are also working on the guidelines of the INEGI that us as different institutions create cartography and that we must observe. Geographic name is precisely one of the features that we must standardize, being the leaders in INEGI for all cartographic products. In a presentation that was presented before a Latin American Forum of Electoral Cartographies, the representative of Argentina said that everything that we were mentioning here in Mexico was huge regarding the magnitude of the works, because we were saying that we only had 540 cartographer technicians in order to make the updates. Apparently, we say our staff is very slim, but for them, it was like an army of persons working in favor of cartography.
En el Instituto Federal Electoral nosotros tenemos
At
el
the
encargo
IFE,
de generar una cartografía que
we have
permita
been asked
a
to
los
create a
ciudadanos
cartography that allows the citizens, whenever they go and ask for their ID voting card,
sus datos de georreferencia a nivel de
to create their
distrito electoral
georeference data,
municipio o
the
localidad.
municipality and the locality. And that is where we fit in the definition of geographic names.
Entonces, la primera parte que nos expresa
So the first thing that you see on the screen
hubo una conferencia en las
is
Naciones Unidas
that
que se
there was a conference held in the United Nations back in 1967. Among their main objectives was to establish what was going to be the standard in order to establish as
hágase la redundancia de nombre geográfico.
the definition of geographic names. And one of the
Es que el
points
nombre geográfico es una designación que se forma por dos palabras
is a definition created by two words that have to do with their specific geographic features. Geographic names are submitted to different laws of region, phonetics, natural transformation, and the culture, historical culture where it arises from. Geographic names have two components. Component one is common sense, and the second component is called their own, its own. It's proper. So these geographic names have the features that they come from and that they have the origin in the Nahuatl tongue. Obviously, because it was the group, the cultural predominant group at the arrival of the Spaniards in Mesoamerica. Nahuatl, obviously, a very wealthy tongue with all the components in order to give that category, grammatical rules and everything, make that many of the localities and municipalities that we know at present derive from that Nahuatl origin. Nahuatl means who speaks well and it speaks clear. And one of the examples that we are stating on the screen is the geographic name of Mexico. Maybe we are entering a very tricky road to walk in, but maybe among our participants, there's people that's knowledgeable on etymology, but one of the definitions of the word Mexico, that means city of Mexitli, founded by Tenoch, which Tenochtli was one of the priests that have been guiding the Aztec people all the way to Mexico City. Another definition for Mexico is it is the moon's navel, the navel of the moon. The surface for square kilometers and other number of blocks that integrate that section. And then finally, we have the total amount of citizens that are in the voters roster. Another variation is the transfer that it takes to go from one location to the voting polls. I am mentioning districts. I should be talking about an electoral district, as you all know, politically or representative at a legislative power is integrated by a chamber of deputies and a chamber of senators, or a senate. It has two ways of electing: one, representative, full majority, and other one, proportional. Absolute is selected throughout 300 electoral districts. So an electoral district is one of those 300 portions of the Mexican territory where we will be electing a representative of the deputy chamber. And minimum geographic is what we use in order to make the planning to install the voters' polls during a local voting session. So these are the 4 variables that we are using as parameters in order to compute a table that is also associated to that geographic name. Why? Because with that small or huge army that we have of 540 cartographers at a domestic level, we have to make a tour, constantly be touring the areas. Professor was mentioning the essence of science is change. And since the essence of our works is cartography, we have to be scheduling constantly or cartographic tours in order to mapping tours in order to figure out what is going to be merged, what is not, and maybe we can have new localities, new geographic maps that come to be incorporated, and maybe in the next month we will be discarding them because that settlement merged with another settlement, and the one that has a greater number of voters is the one that's going to subsist or survive. So then on the next page, you can observe 3 lines. One, the blue one, that is electoral sections. The green one, that's a mixed. And then the pink one, or fuchsia, that's urban areas. These are the 3 kind of electoral sections that we have. Urban sections are those, our main component is precisely high concentration, population concentration. Rural is all the contrary, high extensions of land created by localities. There is no street lines, and the view is a component, a hybrid component of both electoral sections, urban and rural. And as you can observe, we have a formula that's talking about the scheduling table that we have to consider to know what are the working laws that the cartographers will have in order to update not only the geographic names, but at large of all aspects that they can identify on their field work and record all those variables on cartography. Further down in your presentation, you will see a table, an example, and that example is showing us how we are going to be calculating time in order to figure out our scheduling of those workloads, field workloads. And those, well, those are issues that show us how to do that calculation and the internal complexity of calculating the transfer time from and to destination point, and then the time that it will take them to make the tour in order to collect all that cartographic information. Maestro Eduardo will be in charge of the other part of this presentation. So he gives the floor to Eduardo.
Good afternoon. Well, the part that I'm going to continue with is the importance of geographic names for addresses of citizens. And for this, we're going to refer to the objectives of the electoral mapping and the standards that we abide by at the Federal Electoral Institute. So in our code, it says that all citizens, we must all vote in the electoral section corresponding to our address. And this is where the use of geographic names comes in, to be able to assign the electoral section to which each of the more than 80 million citizens that we are here, that live here, how can we assign that to them? So first we go from greater to lesser order. Well, first we have the entity, in other words, the state, based on the political constitution. Then there's a district, which doesn't necessarily have a name. It just has codes. Then the municipalities. And in principle, federally speaking, we don't generate municipal elections. So the name of the municipality is just a backup for us. Then there's a section. It's enough to assign a section in order to comply with the rules or the regulations. But with the introduction of extraordinary voting booths, we have to go to smaller levels, smaller than geographic names, or more reduced than geographic names. In the case of extraordinary voting booths, just as in the same of real subdivisions, we have to go to inside this section in order to be able to assign with more precision the reference to the citizen. So we talk about blocks. And to be able to do that, then we have to go to the following level of geographic names, which is the names of streets and roads and avenues, so that we can identify in the modules the citizens. So we talk about the streets and the cross streets, the avenues, and so on, of where the person lives. So first there's the name of the street, their street name, and then between what streets their address or their residence is located. And we even go further than that. So we talk about the exterior number of the building or of the dwelling, and this is especially important when a citizen lives on a block that is a limit between sections, because it's important to be able to assign or discriminate to which of the two sections on that limit that citizen belongs to, so that we know for certain that he or she will be voting in the correct section. If a citizen indicates that his or her address to the street name, there is uncertainty as to which block he or she is talking about. It can be the block on either side of the street. So in the case of extraordinary voting booths, they came up because principally to address areas where if somebody who lives near to a river or something like that, and that's what divides the section, and it's difficult for the citizen to get to a voting booth that was assigned to him or her in that section. So in principle, each section has one voting booth, and obviously the booth has adjacent booths depending on the number of citizens, taking into account that each booth should contain maximum, or should only a maximum of 1,500 citizens should vote per booth. So because of this, the need arose of installing additional booths that would enable citizens to go out to vote without having to have a problem of how to get to the booth. So the assignment of booths, in order to be able to assign them, we have to have the block reference, because that's where sections are divided. In rural sections, it's not such a big problem because normally entire localities are assigned to a specific booth. And what has happened lately is that there's been an increase of extraordinary booths in urban areas. And this implies that localities, urban localities that are divided into blocks, they are divided into these extraordinary booths. And then that's why we have to go down to levels even lower than just the streets. And that's why we have to take into account the exterior number of the buildings. In addition to the information that we give to the modules at this level, we also carry out programs, georeference programs for citizens. Very often, and the modules that provide services to citizens, for instance, if there's an ambiguity in the address of a citizen, for instance, that the street doesn't have a name, for instance, or there's no exterior number, then it's difficult for our technicians to be able to assign accurately the block. So periodically we validate, and they're automated for the correction or reassignation of references, of citizens' references, if for any reason our technicians, if they made a mistake when assigning the georeference. And we're talking about the level of the block. Well, I think that's the end of my presentation. Okay, le damos las gracias, la participación. I'm sorry, we thank both of our representatives from the IFE and thank them for their presentations. So we have a few minutes for questions and answers. If anybody has any questions or any comments, please. Yes, good afternoon. My name is César Camacho and I work at Cedesol. What source do you use for the names of localities, of settlements? I'm sorry, the names of settlements, you mean? Where do we get them? Was that the question? Yes. Well, settlements or localities, we identify them geographically in two ways. Identifying what we call the ones that are heads of municipalities and localities that are not. The first category, the ones that are ahead of a municipality, we necessarily have to have documentation through a decree or order to know what is the name that the competent authority has given to that locality. When we're talking about lesser localities that are not municipal heads of municipalities, then we base ourselves on documents issued by municipal authorities through the police and good governance. So to be able to see what is the name that they know that locality by. If there's an ambiguity because a locality is between two municipalities, we ask both municipalities to tell us if the locality belongs to one or the other. and how they identify it, with under what name they identify it, because perhaps they may be known more or less by the same name in both municipalities. For instance, Huehuetlán el Grande and Huehuetlán el Chico, in other words, Huehuetlán the elder and Huehuetlán the younger, and they both recognize that there's locality, but we would have to see if we're talking about the same by identifying the spatial, but through spatial identification and via certification by the corresponding authorities. So in terms of localities, you don't use, you have to use a catalog of codes that already exist, the existing codes. Well, that's part of the work that we were saying that's what we're doing. We're standardizing all of that. And under the direction, under the National Geographic Institute, the INEGI, and other agencies, government agencies, that we are doing mapping, updating. We are seeing what is the correct name that we would have to be using, that all of us would have to be using, but because the specific work, cartographic work, has an impact at an electoral level, our migrating to that standardization has had and will need a certain amount of time to produce a general catalog. And with respect to districts, or a city is divided here into districts, neighborhoods, so to speak. Well, as far as neighborhoods are concerned, basically, we are not, what we do is we follow the document issued by the citizen when he does the formalities. He has an identification, and it says what district he lives in. And that's the one that we compare with. And if it's already in our register, then the citizen, we go ahead with the formalities, and we give him that georeference. If it doesn't coincide with our register, then automatically an instruction is issued through a cartographic system, so that the mapper will go to verify if we're talking about a new section or development, or if it's the same one that we have, but that perhaps has another name. So that's also a job that we have to standardize. And in this respect, the working meetings that we have, the INEGI and CEPOMEX, in other words, the Mexican postal system and the tax ministry, we're trying to homogenize all of the different districts or areas, and the one who's really leading this is the Mexican Postal Office. And so this is a job that we're doing little by little, and at the end, the person who's going to, or the institution that's going to dictate the criteria of how we decide on what district it is, it's the postal office. Right now, what we do is we take the data that's presented by the citizen in his proof of domicile. Yes, good afternoon. Jesus Pastrana from the government of Chiapas. Some of my question has been answered, but at the state, we've had the situation that there have been conflicts or discrepancies between the IFE's cartography and the INEGI's cartography as far as municipal limits. So we've had settlements that, according to the IFE, are in one municipality, and the INEGI says that it's in another municipality. So are you also standardizing these sorts of situations in addition to the names? Well, because of time limits, we'll only have time to answer the gentleman's question, and then we'll have time for one other question. Yes, as I was saying a little while ago, our cartography or mapping has the characteristic is that to be able to change, we have to have a document that's issued by an authority, that legally is authorized to do so. So at the level of municipalities in the states, well, who generally has that faculty are the congresses in each state. They can tell us, they can, if they can create or change the limits between municipalities, and our obligation is to represent those new municipalities or that modification in our electoral maps. However, to move a line, you will understand that this implies pulling hundreds or thousands of voters from one place to another. So it's not an activity that we can just do if we aren't absolutely certain and legally certain that we are representing faithfully on the map the limits that the Congress approved. The particularity we have is precisely in Chiapas is that we have 12 municipalities that in effect we cannot represent in our electoral mapping at the federal level because they have ambiguities at points that don't allow us to close the polygon. You'll remember at school that they would put certain points, and then with lines we would connect the dots so that we could form a certain figure. But in the decrees that have been issued, the Chiapan Congress, there have been ambiguities. There are lines that cross each other, or that they generate areas that belong both to one municipality as to another. So because there's this ambiguity, what we have done is notified the authorities, the congressional authorities, on several occasions, beginning in 1995, where we had a problem with 7 municipalities that have been unable to identify precisely where are the limits of the new municipalities that they have authorized, and therefore our cartography is different. And because at the municipal level we're not the ones who organize elections, it doesn't really affect us, but we have notified the Congress, and the Congress has as yet, as far as I know, has not generated a new decree or issued a new decree that will enable us to work without ambiguity. And to guarantee municipal elections, the local electoral institutes, in this case Chiapas, through an agreement, tells us which are the localities that they want to vote for for a particular municipality, and which for another municipality. And that's how voting, local voting, can go ahead without too many complications. But until you eliminate those ambiguities, we cannot represent those 10 municipalities in the federal electoral maps. What happens when a street changes its name? And then when you're going to do the formalities, or you're going to get your voter registration card, the technician gives you the option of choosing what name will appear on your voter registration card, the previous name or the current name. And is there in this cartography those two sections, or do you have both names, or what? Well, the citizen's address, which is the one that appears on the voter registration card, we don't take the name for our mapping, but we take the name from the proof of domicile from the citizen. So he will bring a document that's proof of his residence, and that's the name we use. If they don't coincide, if it doesn't coincide with us, automatically our cartographers are notified so that they can go and verify that that street actually exists where the citizen says that he or she lives. I can't hear her because she doesn't have the mic, so I don't know what she's saying. I can't hear her, okay? She doesn't have a microphone. Excuse me. Well, to add to my colleague's answer, that's field work. And what we do in the first part is we say, how frequently do we update our maps? Well, that's why I said that, in my opinion, we have few people, 540, cartographers to update 67,946 electoral divisions that we have all over the country. That's not enough. So we have to have a scheduling or a programming, and that programming we schedule it in terms of the growth that the electoral sections show. And obviously there are streets that change name, but somehow, or people identify them with two names also, that happens. So our cartography, if you ask us, it's free and it's transparent, and the only thing that you're asked for is that you replace the discs or DVDs. Just give us those so that we can give you the information. You just have to provide the DVD. And you'll see that on our PDF cartographic planes, you'll see that there's a street that has one name, a specific name, X, and then another in parentheses, which is the one that that people also know that street by. So when that happens, the citizen is given the option, well, which of the two names do you want to use? The one in parentheses, which is the one that sort of people use, the common one, or the one that's the other name, the official name, so to speak, that street is also known by. And because in terms of sections, of electoral sections and voting, that doesn't cause any conflict for us. That's why we allow you to decide which of the two street names you want to use. Okay, well, because of time limits, if she would like to approach our presenters personally, and because of time, we're going to have to bring this panel to a close. And please just ask you for a round of applause for all three of our presenters. And I'm going to give a small gift to our speakers. Sí, yo tampoco sé, no tengo ni idea.